People always say money changes you. Honestly, I think that's a load of garbage. Money doesn't change who you are. It just acts like a giant magnifying glass. It makes you more whatever you already were. If you were a jerk when you were broke, you'll be a massive jerk when you're rich. And if you were a guy who liked fixing things with his own two hands, well, having 7 zeros in your bank account won't stop you from crawling under a sink. Which is exactly where I was when I was on a Tuesday afternoon. Flat on my back, half-shaved under a leaky bathroom cabinet, wrestling a stubborn piece of PVC pipe. Arthur, are you doing the plumbing yourself? Wiping the streak of dirty water off my forehead and slid down from under the sink. Standing in the doorway of the bathroom was Ryan. He was wearing a slim-fit navy suit, a tie that probably cost more than my first car, and a pair of shiny brown dress shoes. He looked like a guy ready to sell you $1 million house. I looked down at myself. I was wearing an old fitted Carhartt jacket, a gray t-shirt, and work boots covered in dry mud. The management company couldn't send a guy out until tomorrow, I said, grabbing a rag to wipe the grease off my hands. Figured I'd just take care of it. What I didn't tell Ryan, what I had never told Ryan, was that I owned the management company. In fact, I owned this entire high-rise apartment building in downtown Dallas, along with about 30 strip malls, a dozen office parks, and a few thousand acres of prime Texas real estate. For the last 25 years, I've built one of the biggest commercial real estate portfolios in the state. But if you saw me driving my beat-up 2004 Chevy Silverado down the highway, you'd think I was just a tired, old maintenance man hoping to make rent. And I liked it that way. When people think you have nothing, they show you exactly who you are. They don't wear masks around the help. Ryan gave me a tight, polite smile. He was my daughter Jess's fiancé. I liked Ryan. I really did. He wasn't a bad kid, but he was deeply infected with that modern hustle culture. He was a real estate agent trying to climb the corporate ladder at Horizon Realty. He worshipped expensive watches, leased luxury cars he could barely afford, and cared way too much about what other people thought. Jess, my daughter, was the total opposite. She is a high school history teacher. She drives a Honda Civic, buys her clothes on sale, and has no interest in my money. When she started dating Ryan 2 years ago, she begged me not to tell him about my business empire. Dad, I want him to love me for me, she had said, sitting at my kitchen table, not because I have a trust fund. So, I played along. To Ryan, I was just Arthur, a retired contractor living in a modest pension in the suburbs. Well, the sink looks great, Arthur, Ryan said, checking his phone. He seemed nervous. He shifted his weight from one shiny shoe to the other. Listen, the reason I stopped by my parents are flying in from Chicago this weekend. They really want to meet you. A meet-parents dinner, I said, leaning against the counter. Sounds serious. Yeah, it is, Ryan said. He puffed out his chest a little. My dad, Rick, he's very successful. He likes things done a certain way. He booked a table at the Oakwood Country Club for Saturday night. Oakwood, the kind of place where the waiters wear white gloves and look down their noses at you if you don't know which fork to use for the salad. I actually golfed there with the owner on Tuesdays, but Ryan didn't need to know that. Sounds fancy, I said mildly. Ryan cleared his throat. He looked at my dirty work boot, then up at my face. He had that awkward look of a guy trying to deliver bad news without getting punched. Arthur, I mean this with total respect, but the Oakwood has a strict dress code. Could you maybe wear a nice collared shirt? And maybe, real shoes. My parents are just a little particular. There it was. The gentle, polite disrespect. He was embarrassed by me. Normally, I would just laugh it off. I've been underestimated by much smarter men than Ryan. But then, he said something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Besides, Ryan continued, totally unaware of the shift in my mood. My dad said he thinks his family used to know you. I mentioned your name and that you used to do some construction work back in the 90s. He asked if you ever worked with his older brother, Walter Vance. The bathroom suddenly felt very cold. I kept my face completely blank. Years of sitting at negotiation tables had taught me how to turn my emotions off like a light switch. Walter Vance, I repeated slowly. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. Yeah, Ryan smiled, thinking we were bonding. My dad said Walter had a business partner in Texas who completely screwed him over. Ruined his life, actually. But I told him, no way, Arthur is just a sweet, retired blue-collar guy. It can't be the same Arthur. Anyway, I gotta get back to the office. See you Saturday, okay? Don't forget the collared shirt. Ryan waved and walked out of the apartment, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood there in a quiet bathroom for a long, long time. I looked down at the heavy steel wrench, still resting on the counter. Walter Vance. In 1998, Walter Vance was my business partner. We were supposed to build a housing development together. Instead, Walter embezzled $400,000 from our joint account, blew it all on underground poker games, and left me holding the bag. I almost lost my house. I almost lost everything. When I finally caught him, I forced him out of the company. I gave him a choice: walk away with nothing, or go to prison. He walked away. He died a few years later, leaving behind a mountain of secret debt and apparently a little brother named Rick, who had been fed a giant lie. And now Rick Vance was coming to dinner at a fancy country club to meet the sweet, blue-collar guy who was marrying his son. This wasn't a family dinner. This was a setup. I reached into the pocket of my dusty Carhartt jacket and pulled down my cell phone. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice before a deep voice answered. "Mike," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "It's Arthur." "Hey, boss," my lead attorney answered. "What do you need?" "I need you to go down to the basement archives," I said, staring at my own reflection in the bathroom mirror. "Find the old physical files from 1998, the housing project. I need everything you have on a man named Walter Vance. Bank statements, signed confessions, all of it. Walter Vance? Mike? Mike sounded confused. Arthur. That was 25 years old. 25 years ago. That guy is dead. I know, I said quietly, but his brother is coming to dinner on Saturday, and he thinks he's hunting a sheep. I picked up the heavy wrench and tossed it into my toolbox with a loud, sharp clang. Make sure the files are clean, Mike. It's gonna be a very expensive dinner. There is very specific look a valet driver gives you when you pull up to a luxury country club in a dirty 20-year-old truck. It's a mix of confusion, pity, and an annoyance. He looked at my 2004 Chevy Silverado like it was a garbage can on wheels. Evening, I said, handing him the keys. He held them with 2 fingers. Sir, the delivery entrance is around the back. I'm eating in the dining room, I said flatly. I didn't wait for his reaction. I just walked past the line on a shiny black Mercedes and BMWs straight through the heavy glass doors of the Oakwood Country Club. I was wearing a plaid button-down shirt. It had a collar just like Ryanesque. It was clean, tucked into a pair of dark jeans, and paired with my tiniest work boots. To anyone else in that room, I looked like a guy who had saved up for 6 months just to afford an appetizer here. The hostess led me to a large booth in the back. Sitting there were 4 people. My daughter, Jess, looked beautiful but stressed. She was twisting a paper napkin in her lap. Next to her was Ryan, wearing another sharp suit, his hair perfectly gelled. Across from them sat Rick and Barbara Vance. You can always spot people who are trying too hard to look rich. Real wealth is quiet. Fake wealth is loud. Rick was wearing a shiny gray suit with a pink silk tie and a gold watch that was practically screaming for attention. Barbara was covered in heavy pearl jewelry and smelled like half a bottle of expensive perfume. Dad! Jess stood up and hugged me tight. She whispered in my ear, "Please be nice. They've been awful so far." "I'm always nice, sweetie," I whispered back. I sat down. Rick leaned across the table and stuck his hand out. "Frank, right?" "No, wait, Arthur. Nice to finally meet you, Audie." He squeezed my hand way too hard. The classic power move of a guy who reads too many business magazines. I let him squeeze, keeping my face completely relaxed. "Arthur is fine," I said. Barbara smiled at me. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you dress so comfortable, Arthur." I told Rick we should have gone to a casual steakhouse, but he insisted on awkward. "I hope you don't feel too out of place." "I'll manage," I said, picking up the menu. The dinner was exactly as painful as you would expect. Rick ordered the biggest, most expensive steak on the menu and a bottle of wine that cost more than most people make in a week. He spent the next 45 minutes talking loudly about his investments back in Chicago. his golf swing, and how hard it is to find good help these days. Ryan sat there nodding along, looking at his dad like he was a superhero. Jess mostly stared at her plate, kicking my foot under the table every time Rick said something obnoxious. I just ate my roasted chicken and listened. I didn't interrupt. I let Rick paint a picture of himself as a titan of industry. I let him feel tall because I knew the higher he climbed, the harder the fall was gonna be. When the waiter finally cleared our dinner plates, the mood at the table shifted. The fake smiles vanished. Rick wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, leaned back and reached inside his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick, legal-size envelope and tossed it on the middle of the table. Smack! The sound made Jess jump. Ryan frowned, looking at the envelope. "Dad, what's that?" "Quiet, Ryan," Rick said. His voice was completely different now. Cold, sharp, and totally in control. He looked right at me. "Let's stop playing games, Arthur. I know who you are, and I know exactly what you did to my older brother." I put my fork down. "Is that right?" 25 years ago, Rick said, pointing a finger at me. "You and Walter built a company. And when the money started rolling in, you pushed him out. You locked him out of the bank accounts, stole his share of the business, and left him with nothing. He died broke because of you." I felt Jess grab my arm under the table. Her hand was shaking. He had no idea what Rick was talking about. "He told you I stole from him?" I asked quietly. "I don't need to hear your lies, Arthur," Rick snapped. "Walter told me everything before he died. You ruined my family, and now my son is about to marry your daughter. You think I'm gonna let you attach yourself to my family's success after what you took from us?" Barbara chimed in, her voice dripping with poison. "We simply cannot allow your Ryan to marry into a family with such a dirty history. It would ruin his reputation at the firm." "So, here's how this works," Rick said. He split the envelope across the table until it touched my water glass. Inside is a quitclaim deed. I did my research. I know you own a nice little 3-bedroom house on 2 acres of land out in the suburbs. This is the only real asset you have to your name. He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. You are going to sign that house over to me tonight. Consider it a late payment for the debt you owe my brother. You sign the property over, and we let this stupid wedding happen. We pretend none of this ever occurred." The table went dead silent. The only sound was the clinking of glasses from the other side of the restaurant. Jess let out the sharp gasp. "Are you insane? Are you blackmailing my father for this house?" "I'm taking back what's ours, little girl," Rick sneered, and he looked at me again. "If you refuse, Arthur, my lawyers will drag you into court tomorrow morning. I will sue you for every penny of my brother's lost wages. I will drain whatever tiny retirement fund you have left. And Ryan will call off this wedding immediately. Right, Ryan?" I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I didn't even blink. If you have been at the top of the food chain for as long as I have, threats like this don't make you angry. They just make you tired. Rick Vance thought he was a wolf cornering a sheep. He has absolutely no idea. He had just walking right into the bear trap. I reached down and picked up my glass of iced tea. I took a slow, deep sip. The ice clinked against the glass. I set it down gently on a napkin. Then I completely ignored Rick. I turned my head and looked directly into the eyes of the young man sitting across from me. "Ryan," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but heavy enough to freeze the room. "Did you know about this, son?" The silence at the table was heavy, like the air right before a thunderstorm. Everyone was waiting for Ryan to speak. Ryan was staring at the legal envelope sitting next to my water glass. His face was completely pale. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on the train tracks and the train was right behind him. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "I ask you a question, Ryan," I said quietly, never taking my eyes off him. "Did you bring my daughter to this dinner so your father could steal my house?" "No," Ryan finally choked out. He practically shouted. A few heads turned at the tables nearby. He grabbed the edge of the tablecloth, his knuckles turning white. "Mr. Arthur, no. I swear to God. I thought we were just having dinner. I didn't know anything about a deed to your house." Jess let go of my arm under the table. He looked at Ryan, studying his face for a long, terrible second. I watched her too. I knew my daughter's heart. If she saw even 1 ounce of a lie in his eyes, the engagement ring would be off her finger before dessert. But Ryan wasn't lying. He was terrified. He turned to his father, looking completely betrayed. "Dad, what is this? Are you insane? You're blackmailing Jeff's dad for real estate." Rick didn't flinch. He just waved a hand through the air, completely brushing off his own son. "Grow up, Ryan. This is business. This man stole from your Uncle Walter. He ruined him. It's time to settle the score." Barbara sighed dramatically. She picked up her heavy wine glass. "Ryan, sweetie, we are just protecting your future. You can't attach yourself to a family with this kind of background. Think of your career at Horizon Realty. What would your bosses say?" Ryan looked sick to his stomach. I decided I had let them perform long enough. It was time to pull the curtain down. I reached down beside my chair and picked up a worn, heavy Melina folder. I set it right in the middle of the table, gently dropping it over the top of Rick's envelope. "The documents are missing something important, Rick," I said softly. Rick frowned at the folder. "What's that?" 25 years ago, Walter and I were partners," I said, finally looking Rick straight in the face. "We started a company together, a housing development out near Dallas. I brought the money. Walter brought the construction experience. The plan was to build 200 homes." Rick crossed his arms over his chest. He looked so sure of himself. "Yes, and then you kicked him out. You locked him out of the bank. I've heard the story." "You heard a story," I corrected him. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. My voice dropped an octave, losing every ounce of the nice old man routine. Walter didn't leave because I kicked him out. Walter left because I caught him. Rick's smug smile faded just a tiny bit. Caught him doing what? I flipped open a Molina folder. The first page was an old yellow bank statement. There were numbers highlighted in bright yellow marker. I slid it across the table until it touched Rick's plate. Embezzling, I said clearly. He was skimming money off the top of our construction loans. $40,000 the first month, $70,000 the next. Over a whole year, he stole nearly $400,000. Rick stared at the old paper, his mouth opened slightly. That's a lie. You faked this. Keep looking, I said, my voice as calm as still water. I pulled out a second sheet of paper. This one had a signature at the bottom, a signature Rick would instantly recognize. Walter didn't spend the money on the business, I continued. He didn't spend it on his family. He spent it at underground poker tables in downtown Fort Worth. He owed money to people you do not want to owe money to, Rick. I tapped the paper with a signature. When I found out the company was completely broke, I had two choices. I could call the police and send your brother to the federal prison for 10 years, or I could let him sign a full confession, hands over his empty shares of the company, and walk away, because I had a hurt back. I had a heart back then. I let him walk. Rick stared at the confession. He leaned in close. He saw his own brother's handwriting, the messy, frantic crawl of a man who knew he was caught. He wouldn't do that, Rick said, but the voice cracked. The absolute certainty he had 5 minutes ago was crumbling. Barbara put her wine glass down fast. Rick. What's that paper? Rick didn't answer her. His face started turning an ugly, blotchy shade of red, the kind of red that comes when a massive ego collides with reality. He suddenly realized he had spent 25 years worshipping a brother who was nothing but a thief. And worse, he realized he had just tried to blackmail a man who held all the cards. Rick's hand shot out. He slammed his palm down on the table, right on the top of the old bank statement. The heavy thud made the table shake violently, and the silverware clattered loudly. A steak knife slid off a plate and hit the floor with a clatter. You're lying, Rick shouted, his voice cracking loudly in the fancy dining room. People at the next table jumped in their seats. This is fake. You printed this out to save your own skin. My brother was a good man. I just watched him melt down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move an inch. You can yell all you want, Rick, I said coldly, but yelling doesn't change a bank statement. Rick grabbed his water glass like he was going to throw it. His chest was heavy. He looked like a corner animal trying to bite its way out of a trap. Barbara grabbed his arm, pulling him back. Rick, stop it. People are looking. Jess looked at me, her eyes wide with total shock. He had never seen this side of her father before, the side that crushed people. Now, I said smoothly, leaning back in my chair and folding my arms. that covers the past. But let's talk about it right now, Rick. Let's talk about why you're really trying to steal my property tonight. Because I know the truth about that too. Rick froze. The anger left his face, replaced by a sudden flash of pure, terrified panic. Let's talk, I said, about the fact that your house is being foreclosed on. The word foreclosed dropped into the middle of the table like a brick. Rick stopped breathing. Barbara's hand froze mid-air, right next to her wine glass. Even the wealthy couple at the next table, who had been trying to ignore our drama, stopped eating and stared openly. Foreclosed? Ryan repeated the word slowly, sounding like he didn't understand English anymore. Dad, what is he talking about? Rick's face was no longer red. It was gray, like old cement. He opened his mouth, but only a dry sound came out. The powerful, confident man who had ordered the most expensive steak in the restaurant was completely gone. I didn't give him a chance to recover. When you find a hole in someone's armor, you don't poke it. You drive a truck through it. I reached back into my Melina folder. I pulled out a single sheet of paper and set it directly in front of Rick. It wasn't 25 years ago. It wasn't 25 years old. It was script, new, and printed 3 days ago. This, I said calmly, is a copy of the public notice filed by your bank in Chicago last Tuesday. You haven't paid the mortgage on your 5-bedroom house in 7 months. You owe the bank nearly $500,000. They are seizing your property a week from Monday. Barbara gasped so sharply he choked on her own spit. He grabbed her pearl necklace, coughing loudly into her napkin. Rick stared blankly at the paper. He didn't even try to grab it. You aren't here to get justice for your brother, I said, my voice dropping lower, cutting right through his pride. You don't care about Walter. You don't care about my daughter or this wedding. You are drowning in debt, Rick. You owe $80,000 on 3 different credit cards. You leased 2 luxury cars you can't pay for. I leaned in closer. You saw an opportunity. You thought I was just some dumped old man with a nice piece of property you could steal. You planned to force me to sign over my house so you could sell it and pay off your bank before your country club friends found out you were totally broke. Dad, Ryan's voice cracked. He looked at Rick, his eyes wide with horror. Dad, tell him he's lying. Tell me this is a joke. Rick looked down at his lap. He couldn't even meet his own son's eyes. He had spent his whole life pretending to be a giant, and now he was shrinking right in front of us. Tell me, Ryan yelled, his hands shaking. He pushed his chair back violent. You tried to rob her dad because you're broke. You tried to use me. Ryan, sweetheart, please, Barbara whimpered, her face tight with panic. She reached out, grabbed his arm. Your father just had some bad investments. The market has been terrible. We were just trying to save our home. Ryan violently yanked his arm away from his mother. He looked at her like she was covered in toxic waste. Save your home by stealing a man's property? You're criminals. You are literally trying to extort him. Jess slid her hands over mine. squeezing my fingers tightly. I looked at her, and she nodded just once. She understood why I had to do this. I was protecting her from a family of leeches. I looked at Ryan. The poor kid looked completely crushed. His entire world was falling apart at a fancy restaurant table. She worshipped his dad's success, and now he realized it was all just a cheap, hollow lie. But I wasn't finished. I had one more card to play, because Rick didn't just try to steal from me. He tried to ruin my daughter's life. And for that, he needed a lesson he would never, ever forget. Rick, I said softly, dragging his attention back to me. He slowly looked up. His eyes were red, watery, and totally defeated. The fight had completely drained out of him. You told me earlier that my daughter would ruin Ryan's reputation, I said, my tone almost conversational. You said I was bad for his career at Horizon Realty. Rick swallowed hard, but didn't speak. Well, I continued, tapping the Melina folder. Let me tell you about Horizon Realty. They are a mid-sized brokerage firm, doing very well lately. They manage over 300 commercial properties in the Dallas area. Very impressive. Ryan wiped a hand across his face, looking confused. He had no idea why I was bringing up his job. Arthur, please, don't drag my job into this. I didn't know anything about their plan, I swear. I know you didn't, son, I said gently to Ryan. Then I turned my cold stare back to his father. But since we are talking about his career, Rick, you should probably know who actually owns Horizon Realty. Rick stared at me, unblinking. Horizon is owned by a parent company called Vanguard Property Group, I said slowly, letting every word sink in. And Vanguard Property Group is entirely owned 100% by me. And for a long moment, the only sound was the low hum of the air conditioner. Barbara's jaw dropped so far open, she looked ridiculous. Rick gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning totally white. You, Rick whispered, his voice shaking, I own his firm, Rick. I said flatly. I own the building he works in. I own the chair he sits on. Your son has been working for me for 3 years, trying to climb a ladder that I built. I picked up my water glass and took another slow sip. So, you see, you didn't just try to rob a retired maintenance man tonight. You tried to blackmail a man whose net worth is bigger than the bank that's currently taking your house away. Rick suddenly snapped. The pure shame of it was too much. He grabbed the public's foreclosure notice and violently crumpled it in his fist. He started breathing heavily like a marathon runner. I'll ruin you, he hissed, leaning across the table, his face twisted in an ugly rage. He knocked his wine glass over his elbow. Dark red wine spilled across the white tablecloth like blood, dipping off the edge onto the carpet. You think you can embarrass me in front of my own son? I'll go to the press. I will tell everyone how you destroyed my brother. I didn't even flinch. I just stared at him coldly. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. Rick, I said, my voice quiet but sharp as a knife. You are completely out of moves. If you don't get out of this restaurant right now, I will pull out my phone, call the police, and have you arrested for extortion and causing a public disturbance. And on Monday morning, when the bank take your house, you'll be sitting in a holding cell. I pointed a finger toward the front doors. Leave. Rick froze. He looked at me, looked at the fine wine, and finally looked at his son. Ryan, Rick pleaded softly. Son, come with us. Ryan stood up slowly. He pushed his chair back. He looked at the man he had idolized his entire life, the man whose fake success he had tried so hard to copy. Don't ever call me again, Ryan said. His voice broke, but his eyes were hard. I'm staying here. The walk of shame is a terrible thing to watch, even when the people doing it deserve every second of it. Rick Vance didn't say another word. He let go of the crumple for closer notice. He pushed himself back from the table, grabbed Barbara by the elbow, and practically dragged her toward the front door of the Oakwood Country Club. They walked fast, heads down, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The loud, arrogant couple who had demanded the best table in the room 30 minutes ago were suddenly desperate to be invisible. When the heavy glass doors finally swung shut behind them, I let out a slow breath. I looked down at the table. It was a complete mess. Half-eaten expensive steak, a spilled glass of red wine soaking into the white tablecloth, my Melina folder sitting quietly in the middle of the rhetoric. Jess leaned her head on my shoulder, and I put my arm around her, kissing the top of her head. You okay, kid? I asked softly. Yeah, Dad, I'm okay, she said, her voice shaking just a little bit. I had no idea. I looked across the table. Ryan was still standing. He looked like a man who had just survived a car crash. His sharp, expensive navy suit suddenly looked ridiculous on him. He ran both hands through his perfect gelled hair, ruining his completely. He didn't look at me. He just stared at the spilled wine on the tablecloth. Mr. Vance, he started, his voice thick with emotion. He stopped, swallowed hard, and tried again. Arthur, sir, I am so sorry. Sit down, Ryan, I said gently. No, I can't, he choked out, his eyes filling with tears. He grabbed the back of his chair so hard, his knuckles turned white. My own parents tried to steal your house. He used me to get close to your family so they could rob you. I am so deeply ashamed. I can't marry Jess. It's not right. It's not fair to her. Jess sat up straight. Ryan, no. I resign. Ryan interrupted her, finally looking me in the eye. He looked totally defeated. From Horizon Realty, I'll pack up my desk on Monday morning. I'll give back the company car. I'll completely disappear from your lives. I promise. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands together. I watched him carefully. Sit down, Ryan, I repeated, my voice a little firmer this time. He hesitated, then slowly sank back into his chair. He looked like a little boy who had just been scolded. Let me ask you a question, I said, leaning forward again. I ignored the mess on the table. This was the only part of the dinner that actually matters to me. When you proposed to my daughter 6 months ago, Why did you do it? Ryan wiped a tear away from his eye with his back of his hand. He looked at Jess, his face completely raw and honest. Because she's the best thing that ever happened to me, he said quietly, without hesitating for a single second. Because she loves me even when I'm an idiot. Because she doesn't care about what kind of watch I wear or what car I drive. I love her, Arthur, more than anything in the world. Jess smiled, reaching her hand across the table to grab his. He squeezed it tight. Good. I nodded slowly. That's exactly what I needed to hear. I picked up the crumpled foreclosure notice Rick had dropped and tossed it into the trash can next to our booth. Ryan, I said, looking him dead in the eye, you are not your father. And you are definitely not your Uncle Walter. They spent their entire lives chasing money they didn't earn and trying to look bigger than they actually were. That kind of life always ends exactly how you saw it end tonight, in total humiliation. Ryan nodded slowly, wiping his eyes again. I don't care about the fancy suits, I told him. I don't care about the luxury cars. I care about who you are when things get ugly. Tonight, when your father put a gun to my head, you didn't flinch. You didn't take his side. You stood up for what was right, even though it meant losing your family. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. You aren't quitting Horizon Realty, I said firmly. You are going to the office on Monday morning. You are going to work hard, and you are going to earn your promotions exactly like you have been doing for the last 3 years, because I don't give handouts, son, not even to family. Ryan stared at me, his mouth slightly open. You still want me to marry her? Of course I do, I smiled, a real smile this time. Jess has terrible taste in movies, but her taste in men is actually pretty good. Jess laughed, a bright, happy sound that broke the tension in the room. Ryan let out a long breath, finally relaxing his shoulders. He looked down at the table and smiled for the first time all night. The waiter hurried over, looking terrified of the mess we had made. Is everything all right, sir? He asked nervously. Everything is perfect, I said. I opened my wallet. For the first and only time all evening, I didn't hide who I was. I pulled out a solid black American Express card and set it gently on the check. Please put the entire meal on this, I told the waiter, including 2 bottles of wine the Vances ordered, and add a $500 tip for yourself for the trouble. The waiter's eye went wide as saucers. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. 30 minutes later, I walked down on the Oakwood Country Club. The cool Texas night air felt amazing on my face. I handed my valet my ticket, and he brought my beat-up 2004 Chevy Silverado around to the front. He looked at the truck, then at me, then back at the truck. I tipped him $20 and climbed inside. I rolled the windows down and drove home. Somewhere in this city, Rick and Barbara Vance were packing their bags, preparing to lose their 5-bedroom house to the bank. They had tried to build their lives on lies and stolen money, and the foundation had finally collapsed underneath them. But as I pulled into the driveway of my quiet 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindictive. I just felt peaceful. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I picked it up. It was a text message from Jess. "We're home. Ryan is exhausted, but he won't stop talking about how cool you were. Thank you, Dad. I love you." I smiled in the dark cab of my truck. I typed back, "Love you too, sweetie. Tell him I still expect him to help me fix that leaky sink on Sunday." I turned off the truck and grabbed my worn Carhartt jacket. Some men spend their whole lives trying to look like kings, but real power isn't about demanding a throne. Real power is knowing you own the whole castle and still choosing to sit quietly at the kitchen table. And tonight, everyone finally understood the difference.